transition, promoting multilateralism and sustainable growth across the shared Mediterranean space. Please join me in welcoming to the stage His Excellency Mr. Armando Barruco, Ambassador of Italy to Morocco, Dr. Karim Leinawi, Executive President of the Policy Center for the New South, and Dr. Andrea Dessi, Head of the Italian Foreign Policy Program at the Istituto Affari Internazionali, for welcoming remarks.
It's just that Ambassador Barruco is with the press, so 2-3 minutes, okay?
Alors, d'abord, il paraît que je dois faire un peu les honneurs, et donc, bienvenue à tout le monde, et maintenant je vais passer à l'anglais, qui c'est la langue de la conférence. Hein? Alors, so, first of all, you know, I was actually looking at the logos and of the program of the conference. And as you can see, I see a lot of my past, a lot of my present, and I would say also a lot of my future in this thing. I was Director of Policy Planning of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for almost 6 years, 5 years and something. And one of the small embryo I saw at the beginning was this network that was called the NewMed Research Network. And I'm very happy to see after so many years that it's still there, alive and kicking, and organizing and this is actually the framework under which this conference is organized. And then I see the friend of Istituto Affari Internazionali in Rome, with whom we worked a lot, and Andrea was actually based in my office, more or less. And so I'm very happy to see all of them here, and I'm very happy to see them here in the Policy Center for the New South. Policy Center for the New South, as people who were in the think tank business and in the policy planning business, they know very well, is by far the best think tank in the Mediterranean. And so I'm very happy to see this alliance forging and the possibility for this conference actually to reflect upon the future. And I also want to thank the friend of the Compagnia San Paolo. Thanks to them, it's also possible to have these events, and also actually they are supporting the NewMed Research Network since the beginning and in a very strong way. This is just a welcome to all of you, and I'm very happy to see all of you here, and the Italian and Moroccan and other people friends, and I want actually to say, to welcome my colleague Patricia, the head of the EU delegation, and their presence here and the presence of all our Moroccan friends is very important for this seminar. I will just say, as I said, that I was actually thinking that it brings a lot about my past, my present, and my future. And I go just to 3 main points. The main subject that actually is dealt with in this conference is actually the idea of connectivity and how the events of the past 4 or 5 years have actually affected the value chains and the green transition. And this is very much, I remember, you know, at the beginning of COVID, I remember actually the whole work between, among the world of think tank, etc., was, what does it mean? What will be the consequences in the future? And I remember a little piece coming out from, if I'm not mistaken, it was Parag Khanna. And he was talking about the regionalization of value chain. And he was perhaps, I think, one of the first actually to say, this is what will happen and this is what has to happen. It's a moment for all of us to think about how the disruption of supply chain can affect the way that our global economy is working. And I am actually very happy to see that the reflection is going on, but for us living in Morocco and for us that consider, for a country like Italy, that consider the stability and prosperity of the Mediterranean as the main priority of our foreign policy, the idea that the reflection is going on along these lines in a way in which the Euro-Mediterranean space and the reconsideration of the supply chain should prioritize collaboration with the Mediterranean, and for Europe and for all countries of Europe. I don't want to take too much of your time. I would just say that this is something that is already happening. I was 3 days ago in Tanger in the conference on the automotive sector, and the conference on the automotive sector was actually focusing on Tanger, and Tanger, you know, la ville automobile. And so actually you see something like 22 Italian companies in the automotive sector, and from other companies from France, Spain, investing in Morocco, and giving the idea that the future of our own prosperity is linked to the prosperity of the Mediterranean, and the way that we will manage to collaborate and invest in countries like Morocco. And Morocco, of course, has some pluses that are very important for us in terms of skills, in terms of natural resources, in terms of the fact that the industrial and agricultural fabric, the fabric of the economy of the country is something that gives all the guarantees for the success of your investments. And finally, and I end with that, I like very much the link that has been made between the connectivity and then the future, sustainable energy, and then the fact that of course, we will all have to cope with the priority of the coming months, and then the need to secure our energy supply and our fossil fuels supply. But then all of us, we know very well that the future of our economy is on renewable and on green energy. And from that point of view, I'm very happy that the collaboration between Italy and Morocco from that point of view is going extremely well. We have the main private actor involved in renewable energy in the world, that is Enel Green Power, working for the past 5-6 years here in Morocco, and just now they are already the 4th producer. And when the project that they have of 850 megawatt will be completed with four plants producing renewable energy. When this will be completed, it will be the first foreign investor here in Morocco. So a lot is going on, and we are very happy to have this cooperation in the sector of the future working very well. My last word and words are about something that is a little bit the elephant in the room. And I see Massimo De Andreis and Andrea, who have worked a lot on this subject, is the level of economic integration in the Maghreb area and in the southern Mediterranean. I see that there is a panel that is dedicated also to this subject, and I think this is really the key of the future. And of course, is something that we believe that is essential, that in this part of the Mediterranean there is much more integration, there are natural complementarities, there are countries who have natural resources, there are countries who have skills, who have an administration, who have a mature agricultural and industrial fabric, and this is more than obvious that these countries must work together. But I think I've spoken too much, and I leave the floor to the next speaker, whom, if I'm not mistaken, is Karim, our actual host. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Armando Barruco. Please now join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Karim Nainawi, Executive President of the Policy Center for the New South.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I would like first to thank you, Ambassador Barruco, for being with us, and your embassy for supporting, together with the Compagnia Inter San Paolo, this work, and of course our friends at EIE, a long-standing partner of the Policy Center. We've been working together for years now, and among other things we've done together is publish, almost 5 years ago, a book on gas as a transition source of energy. Let me welcome also Ambassador Lombard-Cusack from European Union. So welcome, Madame l'Ambassadeur, and our friends from the Istituto di Affari Internazionali. Let me share maybe a couple of ideas on what is a complex issue. Let us not be mistaken. This is not a production problem or an industrial problem. This is at the intersection of geopolitics, therefore politics at the international level. This is about, of course, transforming legacy industries, and this is about international cooperation, which is not easy, as we know. And this is why this topic of the combination of value chains and energy infrastructure investment in a regional or global perspective is one of the research programs at the Policy Center. We have a triennial research program, and this is part of it. So we are very glad to be doing this together with a counterpart, a European counterpart in Italy, as this is a regional or an interstate or interregional issue. There won't be any solution at a given country, at the level of a given country, so therefore we need to research those issues. We need to understand each other. We need also to have the right public policies and to have the right incentives for the private sector. And that's quite complex. And I insist on that because often we think that because this is a smart, it's a technological solution, or because it makes sense to burn less fossil fuels, or because it's a no-brainer on the technological side, it works. This is not how the world works, unfortunately, or fortunately enough. We can discuss that. And this is why we need to intensify our discussions so we can have a good understanding of what we want to achieve together. And I think this is part of the future of the relation of Morocco with Europe and with Italy, but more generally of the African continent with Europe. This is an area where predictability is important, and we all lived the COVID experience when simple value chains on simple products broke down, and we had basically governments not able to supply to their population basic goods because of the way we structured value chain, and we thought were robust and resilient, which is not, in the event of a crisis like COVID, was not the case. And the expectation of population is that the state, governments, provides, protects, and it delivers to population this kind of simple goods. And I think energy is included in that. But we shouldn't see it as just being, delivering energy. It's all about the whole, and this is what I like in this conference and the paper we will publish following that. that it includes the value chains, the technology, the production, the organization of the very complex chain of actors around achieving within a multilateral context sustainable growth through sustainable energy. And we are very mindful here of the complex public policies and the complex nature of incentives that one has to put in place to drive the public sector, to make research possible and to make all this financially sustainable, because this is also a solution will have to be market-based. There could be subsidies here and there, but if it's to be sustainable in the long run, it will have to be financially sustainable. We can always have specific frameworks, sets of tax breaks and so on and so forth, but they shouldn't last for too long. And this has also, of course, an international dimension with ongoing discussion at the COP and the price of carbon, etc., etc. So I think we are approaching this at the Policy Center very seriously, but also very, again, mindful of the complexity. A successful project doesn't make a successful transition and a successful partnership between our two continents. We are convinced at the Policy Center that it is one of the sources of growth for the continent, for Africa. Of course, Africa as itself, its development as a source of growth for the world, but also greening its growth as a source of growth for the world. It's a combination, and here we have this combination. And if I'm to conclude, I think we need to have more detailed discussions with Europe on how to make this happen, what it means in terms of incentives, what it means in terms of the incentive framework on both sides of the Mediterranean, and of course thinking of it beyond the Med, but also with Africa in perspective, where the energy demand is going to explode. We know this for a fact. What can government do? What can we do? And how to steer the private sector and its investment horizon? So I'm not sure that we have, and you will correct me, we have ambassadors in the room, but I'm not sure that we have the right space, the right institutional arrangement to have this kind of discussion between us. There is what we do at think tanks, and I think it's an appropriate space for that, but the connection with decision makers, I'm not sure it is optimal. There are discussions with international institutions, and salute Jesko, with our director of the World Bank here with us, but I'm not sure that it goes sufficiently at both levels, at the regional level, if you want, Africa, Europe, let's say to simplify, but also at the appropriate technical level. Otherwise, this is going to be driven by short-term opportunities, as the private sector sees them, or with the sort of blanket public policy approaches that we think are right for one time and in the future. So it's because this is uncharted territory, and we need to adjust public policies all the time, experiment, adjust, assess, evaluate, experiment, adjust, etc. So this needs to be anchored somewhere, and I would say it's so serious, and it has so fantastic potential gains in terms of well-being, in terms of reducing the carbon footprint, in terms of creating jobs, in terms of what it means for Africa's growth, what it means for Europe within a declining demographic context, in terms of sort of balancing part of the growth to Africa. So I think it's a fantastic entry point. So I would encourage our participants to think of a How do we do that? Concretely, how we move from vision, ideas, piecemeal approaches, country-specific approaches, project-specific level approaches, to something that can have a sort of a project that anchors the Africa-Europe relations or in this area. So we are convinced here that the potential is there, but it's very complex to organize, and all this taken within another level of complexity with the current rivalry at the global level in terms of geopolitics, the whole the scene that you all are very much aware of. And at a time where many countries have macroeconomic challenges, in balancing their budget, pressures on fiscal and monetary policy. So this is not easy. Yeah? It's very complex, and this is why we need to research it. We need to intensify our dialogue, understand each other, share views and views and research and results, and to drive the whole set of actors together to something that is beneficial to our population. On both sides of the Mediterranean. So let me close here and thank again our friend at the II Institute in Rome, who are, in a way, are the one who have at the basis of this initiative. And you can count on us. As I said, these are not. This is really our commitment, and we are convinced that there is a great potential. But this is where we need to join forces and to make sure we move from vision also to action and results on the ground as much as we can as think tanks. Of course, we're not policymakers. So thank you again. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will now welcome to the stage Dr. Andrea Desi, head of the Italian Foreign Policy Program at the Istituto Affari Internazionali.
Okay, now I think you can hear me better. Again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today to open this conference. My thanks go first of all to the distinguished president of the Policy Center for the New South, whom it has been an incredible pleasure collaborating with to set up this conference on what I think is a very timely and important topic of discussion today. I would like to take a moment to really underscore how much it has been a pleasure to collaborate with you and the institution here, and it is really an outcome on which we are hoping to build on further in the coming years and the coming months, and that how much our perspectives, our viewpoints on this issue and on the necessity of really bridging the vision and the practice divide has brought our two institutions together to collaborate on this important topic, but also on many other ones in the past years. My thanks go also, of course, to Ambassador Baruco, whose kind words, and it's a pleasure to see again here in Rabat. We have passed a long period together of work and exchanging of ideas and thoughts, and I hope again that we will be able to continue this discussion in the coming months. Coming to the topic today, supply chains and the combined shocks of COVID, the conflict in Ukraine, and of course the commitments of an energy transition are incredibly important and timely today. I think that it is not only important to focus on these areas of possible collaboration, but it's also an important element to look at the bilateral relationship between Italy and Morocco in these dimensions. And again, here there is a lot of potential, and I think there is a lot of also unrecognized progress that is already being made, and the ambassador was excellent in outlining a number of important themes and a number of important sectors in which Italy and Morocco are already collaborating very closely, and it is our hope and it is our expectation as well that this collaboration will continue to grow in the future. My thanks also, though, go to Zineb and the entire team here at the Policy Center, with whom it has been a really excellent collaboration in setting up this project. The distinguished president mentioned that it was something that came from IAI, but I would say that it is very much a joint initiative, both in terms of selecting of the topics, of the drafting of the agenda and the selecting of the experts and scholars who are with us today discussing these important themes. Let me say one word or a few words on the New Med Research Network, which is the project I direct at the Institute, where I am also the head of the Italian Foreign Policy Program. But in the coming days, I will be taking over the Mediterranean Middle East program at the Institute. And also within this context, it will be an incredible pleasure to continue collaborating with the Policy Center and with all our partners in the network throughout the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Now, the New Med Research Network, as Ambassador Baruco already mentioned, is a long-standing project. It's been ongoing since 2014. We have closely followed the evolution of various geopolitical, economic, social trends across the shared Mediterranean space, and I underscore the word shared Mediterranean space because this is very much an integral component of our conceptualization of this project, that the Mediterranean as a shared space between all countries, all Mediterranean basin countries. Over the past 2 years, we have worked very much on the climate emergency as this project. We have published a book looking at the sustainability, the links and the nexus between climate change or the climate emergency and sustainable growth in various countries in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. We have also published a second volume looking at the nexus between climate change and security, and we are working on a further set of projects going into the nexus between climate change, security, and migration. Of course, migration, as an Italian, as a country which has been interested very much by migration, is an important topic, but again, it is a topic that needs to be approached not only from a top-down manner, but in a holistic manner, which underscores again the shared nature of the Mediterranean space and the need for multilateral engagements and multilateral dialogue to be able to develop sustainable policies that can address this issue, both in the immediate but also in its root causes. The underlying idea of the New Med Research Network is again that of fostering new dialogues and new multilateral frameworks for dialogue within the Mediterranean space. This is our idea, our belief that it is indispensable that only through multilateral frameworks where there is a genuine dialogue, where there is a genuine parity, can all these important issues be addressed, but also an effort can be made to contain other trends which could perhaps create challenges. And when I say contain other trends, I also think of the geopolitical trends that the President was mentioning, and that is, of course, in all of our minds in these days and these years. For this regard, it is New Med's commitment to continue working on these issues, continue thinking about new multilateral frameworks for dialogue and collaboration, and a sense and a unity and a feeling of parity between Mediterranean states and Mediterranean basin states. These are the trends that really have followed New Med since the beginning and since I have taken over the project 2 years ago. For this, I do not want to take up too much time. I will end by thanking again our gracious hosts for this fantastic setup and for this fantastic invitation. And I welcome everyone who has come to listen to the talks and the panels. We have 2 paper givers who will be presenting their papers. These will then be published and updated after the debates and be published by both our institutes, and it will be a pleasure to disseminate these and to be able to build on this research for further partnerships and further engagements. My final thanks go, of course, to the Compagnia di San Paolo and Nicolò Russo Perez in particular, who has been from day one a key supporter of the New Med Research Network. Now, you will be seeing me a few times today, so I will not take up too much of your time. I think we are all very much looking forward to the keynote speech and then the panels. So I will close here, and again, thank you all for your attention and for coming today.
Thank you, Dr. Andrea Dessi. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Her Excellency, Ms. Patricia Lombard-Cusack, Ambassador of the European Delegation to Morocco, for a keynote address.
Thank you very much for this very kind invitation to join you today and those very much needed discussions. Their Executive President Elanawi, they are they are Andrea Desi. We just hear from the Institute. They are colleague ambassador Armando Baruco. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, it is a real honor to be able to join you today at this high-level conference on connectivity, value chains, and the green transition organized by the New Med Research Center. I want to thank the Policy Center for the New South and the Istituto Affari Internazionali and the Embassy of Italy for this significant and timely initiative. Timely because of the speed of the geopolitical and economic changes that are taking place require that partners and neighbors like us spend time together to share analysis with a critical eye, to confront ideas, and to shape also together joint policy responses. Significant because our global environment has never been so challenging, with every day bringing another layer of complexity, as it is the case today after yesterday's missile firing between North and South Korea for the first time. A context of crisis that succeed one to another without really being addressed in the substance, and hence with effect and impact piling up, of which the complexity has already been well raised. Looking only at some of the recent ones with most global impact, the COVID-19 crisis revealed our interdependencies and the vulnerability of our economic systems, including the disruption of the global value chains and its impact on the economies and beyond. Discovering in Europe that no one single gram of paracetamol was produced within our borders was a revelation that will bring lasting consequences. Then, at a time when more nations were focusing on the post-pandemic economic recovery, including all of us, Russia engaged in an illegal and barbaric aggression against a sovereign European nation, sending shockwaves around the world and putting at risk the global order and food and energy security. There is no doubt that Russia bears the responsibility, the bulk of the responsibility for the global increases in food and energy prices and for halting the global economic recovery. Its decision last Saturday to suspend participation from the Black Sea deal is yet another shock to global food security. The impact in the Mediterranean space and in Africa cannot be underestimated. This economic and geopolitical context has seriously affected an already very fragile multilateral system. It has brought further disorder and fragmentation, leading to what some call the multilateral disorder. The rules-based international order is being challenged by power politics as never before. There is a deep shift that is taking place from cooperation to competition to conflict, with the return to force. The law of the strongest is eroding agreed international norms and the weaponization of interdependencies. A world in which countries tend to recur more often to intimidation and blackmail to get their way through. A return to force that expands throughout, including into the economic sphere, where the logics of power take over former independences. This is not the world that the EU had wanted. And the question is fundamental. Do we want the global rule of law, or do we want a world in which might is right? To all our woes, one should certainly add the climate crisis, which knows no borders and the reality of which can no longer be contested. In Europe, like in the Mediterranean space, the rise of temperatures and more frequent and extreme weather events take a heavy toll on our economies and our people. Floods, droughts, heat waves, fires become more and more part of our reality. Calling for urgent and effective action to prevent them, but also to better deal with them, is essential. we are all affected, and we all have a role to play to protect the future of our planet and our children. All those deep crises can be seen as an opportunity. We have a tendency to always think about crisis as an opportunity. I prefer to think about crises that call for responsible action. And notably active and proactive action. Those are not times to withdraw within our more or less comfortable borders. Those are not times to raise more borders, not time to raise more barriers, not time for fortresses, but times to engage with others in a manner that is more efficient and more in line with the changing geopolitical landscape. Avenues of bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperation that can take shape in our shared Mediterranean space. It is about the responsibility beyond the short-term urgencies in terms of energy security. Beyond those short-term urgencies, it is the responsibility to accelerate the green transition and turn towards climate neutrality by 2050. The current energy crisis leaves us a big lesson. Clean energy is no longer about reducing pollution or hitting net zero emission targets. It is also about making countries more secure and independent in the energy front. This is where the EU-Morocco Green Partnership that we signed here 2 weeks ago. The first one we have the European Union enter with a third partner, can provide for a model, for a reference for bilateral engagement with impact for the partners, but also with regional multilateral impact. A holistic and ambitious framework of cooperation and a comprehensive sustainability-driven agreement to decarbonize economies, to create green and qualified jobs, and to diversify our energy needs. Also to bring closer together along more efficient, resilient, and sustainable value chains in a mutually beneficial economic cooperation. The partnership will also look at ways to bridge Europe and Africa by joining forces with other countries and partners. Morocco's strategic position and its wide array of established relations with countries in Africa and in the MENA region can really help expanding the benefits of this green partnership beyond our shared borders. This green partnership will also become, as I said, a model for similar partnerships in the region, to get willing partners around the renewable energies, joint technological researches adapted to different needs of the parties, development of the necessary power grids or innovative green businesses as foreseen by the Global Gateway Initiative. There is a great scope to identify real opportunities within this green partnership on the renewables, on the hydrogen, on the circular economy that can be conceived here and can be references for other cooperations or engage in the way cooperations with other countries. And it is also about the responsibility to reinforce the multilateral system at the UN level, but also other international and regional fora, and to make the multilateral system also more inclusive. COP27 is an opportunity to build alliances and coalitions of the willing to address the common challenges of climate change, but also to foster a more inclusive green transition. The European Union works for the adoption of a successful outcome in Sharm el-Sheikh that will ensure an ambitious global response to climate change. And then there is the global trade system. From a new perspective, there is a renewed urgency to support the open rules-based trade. A strategic big power rivalry will probably be the dominant organizing principle for global politics in the decades ahead. This strategic rivalry poses increasing challenges for the established global economic governance. The imposition of unilateral measures outside the framework of the multilateral trading rules has gravely undermined the multilateral trading system. Tariff and non-tariff barriers have gone up worldwide, also in our shared Mediterranean space. And it is true, beggar-the neighbor policies are tempting at times of great uncertainty. Yet they risk making things worse and stifle sustainable growth. The weaponization of interdependencies I referred to before, and what we see since a number of years, had led some to forecast deglobalization. This trend has been accelerating since the pandemic began, and now even more so. A certain reshoring of supply chains is already happening. The ambassador already mentioning, certainly here in Morocco, with very successful experiences in areas like the automobile, the aeronautic, or even the textile, in which many countries are trying to value more security over efficiency, shifting global investment partners, notably more strategic sectors, and energy and raw materials. We are seeing how fragile the international system is. It risks fragmenting further. All told, however, it appears more a scaling back and fragmentalization of globalization than its demise. The EU continues to make the case both for openness and for a reform of the multilateral trading system. Only a rules-based trading environment can provide the stability and predictability the business need if they want to benefit from the opportunities that international trade brings. Fortunately, the WTO managed this year to reach, for the first time in many years, some meaningful achievements. At the 12th Ministerial Conference, members agreed on a significant multilateral agreement to end harmful fisheries subsidies, which is of particular relevance for the region. Importantly, WTO members also committed themselves to embark on a process to reform the organization and to restore its paralyzed dispute settlement function. Since the birth of the World Trade Organization in Marrakesh in 1994, Morocco has traditionally exercised a role of leadership, both in the groups representing African and Arab countries. It is my sincere hope that Morocco will continue to do so, and that we will be working together for a successful outcome of the next ministerial conference. At the same time, the new geopolitical context has reminded us of the value of having trade and investment relations based on trust, shared values, and rules. Hence, our commitment to open trade with trusted partners is undiminished, also bilaterally. This is necessary for economic and sustainability reasons. Trade agreements help partners to bring prosperity and jobs, create export opportunities, connecting each other, and connecting also each other with the key future growth regions. This is also necessary for political regions, for geopolitical reasons. Trade agreements help partners to deepen bilateral ties, enhance access to energy, food, and critical supplies. They help avoiding replacing one dependency by another. It is hence not a coincidence that the EU activity on the trade front is seeing a new momentum, with multiple bilateral negotiations and ratification processes going on in parallel. The EU has recently concluded negotiations with New Zealand, agreements with Australia, Mexico, Chile, and the Mercosur bloc are well advanced and times even close to ratification. After a pause of many years, the ratification process of our agreements with Canada is accelerating, which is at least partially explained by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And of course, there is our common Mediterranean space, a priority for us in the European Union, with whom we look to the partners willing to strengthen our economic and trade links and to work together to mutually support our economies. The EU has proposed a new agenda for the Mediterranean, including a dedicated economic and investment plan to spur the long-term socio-economic recovery in the southern Mediterranean. Up to 7 million will be made available for the region over the period of 6 years. With this plan, which will also benefit Morocco, the EU will work in close partnership with the government of Morocco, with the international financial partners such as the European Investment Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The main objective will be to foster public and private investment. The financial gaps to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 is huge, and public and donor funding alone will not suffice to finance the investment required to achieve the SDGs. It is therefore urgent that we partner with the private sector to boost investments. And the investment plan targets exactly that, to encourage investments which will support the region in its green, energetic, and economic ambitions. We are already working on that. But there are limits to what can be done with public money, even if blended or otherwise leveraged with private sector money. The energy transitions will require much more private investment, much more than is in our public budgets. Morocco has fully understood this as reflected in the new investment charter, which should help it to attract significant private investment. we're looking forward to see the implementing decrees adopted and the consecutive decisions that will be taken to attract private investment, including foreign investment. We need to be able to better mobilize private resources. To do so, the regulatory conditions for engaging large investment projects need to be there as well. Just providing support packages is not enough. Investors need, above all, political stability, legal certainty, predictable regulatory frameworks, and transparent markets, allowing for optimal investment conditions. The EU looks forward to discuss with Morocco and other neighbors how to modernize the relations. And in Morocco, the private sectors have been calling for this modernization to respond to all the challenges responding to the value chains, the connectivity, and the green transition. I share their assessment that the association agreement has allowed for a considerable increase in trade volumes over the past 20 years, but also the finding that today's challenges require the new paradigms to be taken into account, such as the recomposition of value chains, the exponential development of the digital economy, and the indispensable decarbonization of industry. Our private sectors consider that to support the economic recovery, a modernization of the framework of our trade and investment relations will be timely. There is certainly a significant untapped economic potential in our bilateral relation, which should be unlocked, notably by stimulating investments and economic exchanges, by facilitating agri-food trade, by supporting digital services, and by reducing non-tariff barriers and fine-tuning customs procedures. Our private sector considers, and I cite them literally, the European Union has concluded or is in the process of concluding modern trade and investment agreements with partners around the world, but has not concluded such agreements with its neighbors to the south, which is a missed opportunity. This gap is difficult for the private sector to understand, especially in a context where shorter, more sustainable value chains are regularly discussed in diplomatic circles. There is a real opportunity to build common value chains between Morocco and the European Union. I think we all agree that they have made a very valid point. We are looking at manners to modernize this relationship, either through more comprehensive agreements or more targeted approaches, depending on the ambition also of our partners. Ladies and gentlemen, despite of all those challenges, or just because of them, the current geopolitical context warrants for strengthening trade and investment relations and cooperation in many areas. This means making a choice for sustainable and trusted partners, building together a sustainable world. We are trusted partners with a long shared story. Our people and cultures have enriched each other for generations. We have good potential to work together in creating resilient and sustainable value chains. We have the means and the interest to pursue the green and digital transition of our economies together. I will just want to conclude with some final considerations. The Mediterranean space remains an area of strategic importance for the European Union. True, we have to work with and on Ukraine. It is about the sovereignty of a European nation. It is about Europe's security, and it's also about the global order, including global food and energy security. But this does not mean that we will be, or we are turning the back to the Mediterranean, our reciprocal prosperity is closely tied. We will hence remain engaged. We will remain engaged in the conflicts in the region and in devising the best means to sustain prosperity and sustainability in our mutual joint neighborhood. We will engage, and we are ready to engage with all those willing to work in a more pragmatic manner through alliances and specific cooperations. We will at the same time not shy away from difficult decisions when we need to protect interest, always within the rules established by the global order. And also we will take our responsibilities, and we will stand by the countries that will be more severely affected by the impact of the war on Ukraine, in particular in what concerns food security. I just want to conclude to welcome the offer for a better link between the reflections that are carried out in this forum and the policy making. Policymakers have less and less time to carry reflections and are more and more put under pressure for important decisions to be made within very short-term delays. And this is where the role of institutes and networks like yours, which have the enormous added value of bringing from the two sides, people from the two sides of the Mediterranean, are of critical importance, even more in the times that we currently face. We need to see if we are looking at the problems from the right angle. We need to ask ourselves if the economy is not changing in a way that doesn't allow us to continue looking at it from the same lens or from the same prism. We may need to take a step back and see if what we are seeing is a new, completely economy that is emerging and of which we still need to understand the realities. I want to say that on connectivity, green transition, and value chains, the European Union will be looking very, very closely to the Mediterranean space because there are successful experiences, because there are many challenges, but also because this green transition, we are very well aware we can set ourselves the most ambitious objectives if we don't work with third partners, and in this case with our neighbors to start with, we will never succeed. We need multilateral cooperation to be reinforced, and for that we count on Morocco and the partners in the Mediterranean to work together on alliances at the multilateral system that can keep the multilateral system alive, delivering, showing results, and that can demonstrate also to other regions that it is that the global rules of system, even if it needs reforms, it needs to be maintained. So it needs to be preserved. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention, and wishing you all the very good discussions, and really, really, really looking forward for the result of your analysis. And thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ms. Patricia Lombard-Cusack. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Munya Busta, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South, who will chair the session titled Mediterranean Value Chains, From Disruption to New Opportunities for Integration, along with our distinguished speakers, Professor Michael Tanchum, non-resident scholar at the Middle East Institute, who will join us remotely on Zoom, Dr. Massimo De Andres, General Manager of SRM Economic Research Group at Intesa San Paulo, and Professor Larabi Jaidi, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to open the first panel of our conference. I hope that we'll have a very successful and fruitful discussion with our distinguished speakers. As you well know, 27 years ago, countries in the Mediterranean region signed the Barcelona Declaration, a strong political commitment to set the region on path of peace, stability, and prosperity through the development of economic cooperation based on trade, investment, and transfer of technology. Today, the potential of Mediterranean integration is not fully exploited. And today, we are facing many challenges due to the succession of crises which have disrupted our supply chain, affected our competitiveness, and revealed our weakness on terms of food and energy security. Regarding all these challenges, we need to reconsider our partnership from a new perspective, and we need to catalyze regional common goals on comprehensive socio-economic scale. And as our executive president mentioned, we need to create a new framework of shared dialogue, of shared views and opinion. The first panel, represented by three distinguished speakers, will highlight a very important topic: the Mediterranean value chain from disruption to new opportunities for integration. The first speaker is Professor Michael Tenkum, who teaches at Universidad de Navarra and is non-resident fellow in the Economic and Energy Program at the Middle East Institute in Washington, and is senior fellow at the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. He will give paper on the food, energy, and access in the Western Mediterranean, opportunities and challenges for creating sustainable and resilient food production value chains. The paper will be then discussed by Mr. Massimo D'Andres, General Manager at ISRM, Economic Research Center related to the Intesa San Paulo Banking Group, specialized in the Italian economy, energy issues, and maritime economy in the European and Mediterranean perspective. And the second by Professor Larabi Jaidi, Senior Fellow at Policy Center for the New South, who is member of its Editorial and Research Oversight Steering Committee and affiliate professor at the Faculty of Governance, Economic and Social Sciences at the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. I apologize, I will have to ask you to respect the 10 minutes allowed and allocated. So the floor is yours, Professor Tenkum, please.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you. Unfortunately, I couldn't be in person, but to be with you remotely. And I see many new faces in the audience. I'm sorry I couldn't meet you in person, and many old faces where, as you know, we've all been working on these topics together. And this is a topic that's been very close to my heart, very personal. I live in the Eastern Mediterranean and I teach in the Western Mediterranean, and I feel our future is a shared future of cooperation, and we have to do that smartly, based on real interests. And the Mediterranean countries have to work together and define their own agenda together. If not, countries from outside the region will do that. And that is one of my basic messages for the 6 Western Mediterranean countries. And I want to put together 3 things: the nearshoring, the change in supply chains, the unwinding of global supply chains, the climate crisis that we're having, and how that all comes together in the food energy nexus. And this is where we should be creating new and sustainable, resilient food production value chains. And there are many opportunities along the value chains. I've published 200 pages in the last 2 years on this topic. I won't be able to include everything in this talk, but I want to just put some things on the table for our discussion. Okay, so what you see here is it summarizes the issue. This is a man in the Kairouan area, of Tunisia, showing you his soil. Climate change has degraded the soil. There's drought. It cannot produce anymore. And what we have here is geopolitics and geoeconomics, which here I really want to refer to the unwinding of global value chains and the emergence of regional value chains, and then and climate change and where they meet. Now, this has come to everyone's attention because of the Russia-Ukraine war, right? Even EC President von der Leyen, talked about Moscow exploiting this, using it as a weapon, and that is true. But these problems predated the Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, the Russia-Ukraine war only accelerated changes that were underway. And especially what we're seeing is in the supply chain shocks that already existed with COVID-19, which itself was accelerating the regionalization of value chains. So even in 2021, the price of natural gas went up. The price of natural gas in Europe went up 400%. Long before the Russia-Ukraine war happened. The same thing, the food crisis, which, as you know, I'm one of the first people to publish about that in the MENA region, was already, by June 2021, it was a crisis. The unwinding of global value chains and the importance of trans-Mediterranean value chains has already been happening for 4 or 5 years. So one of the great places to see this is very grateful to EI for all the work that I do with them and the New Med Research Network. And here in 2021, it's giving the outlook on what the new value chains would look like, the challenges and opportunities across the Mediterranean. So now Morocco has been at the forefront. As you know, here's Tanger Med. It's the largest port on the Mediterranean now. Outstrips both Algeciras and Valencia. And then, of course, it's combined with the high-speed rail. And France was a very important part of the development of Al-Barak Railway. But connectivity is not just transportation. It is the marriage of transportation networks and industrial base that creates value chains, manufacturing value chains. I put this picture up here because France is has been an important partner for Morocco, but in developing this high-speed rail, no other European partner was involved. The rest of the funding came from the Arab Gulf states, which is important because if the countries of the Western Mediterranean on the southern shore, the Maghreb countries, should get the best deal possible. And so one basic message is the countries of the northern shore of the Mediterranean, France, Spain, and Italy, need to bring their best game. So here, this is something I had talked about. I'm a professor in Spain. I deal with all the major think tanks in Spain, the Spanish Foreign Ministry. And for 3 years, I predicted Spain would change its policy and explained why it would change its policy towards Morocco, because Spain needs to be part of this picture and is a very important partner for this whole Euro-Africa corridor along the Atlantic that Morocco is the hub. And we're going to see very important developments with Spain and Morocco in the future. I can talk about that. But the key here is, again, as I said before in this article, is manufacturing value chains, anchoring the base, the industrial base, with the transportation network. And I have another publication coming out with EI where I'm very concerned about the disparity in the Maghreb, because Morocco is a rising power, and I've written about it, but that is not happening in Algeria and the same, or in Tunisia, and I can explain the reasons. And this is where Ambassador Baruco, who I read your comments in the newspapers all the time, is right that ultimately we have to figure out also how to increase the east-west connections. But what I get concerned about is a stovepiping between, the Atlantic states and the central Mediterranean states. And this is where the Italy-Morocco relationship is crucial in creating a wider Western Mediterranean cooperation in value chains. And this is where, you know, the success of Morocco in its automotive industry. Morocco is the largest producer in Africa now, 750,000 cars per year. With the new addition of the electric vehicles, which I had predicted in my writings that would happen, Morocco is the first North African or African country to produce electric vehicles. That will go up to 1 million a year. But so this is obviously Peugeot and Renault are the leaders, but there are 200 foreign companies in Morocco that integrated into the supply chain. And Italy had played a central role. Italian companies are 10% or more of this value chain. So here, these for our friends in Italy, these are companies that should be familiar to everyone. They all are located in Morocco and employing Moroccans and contributing to Morocco's GDP. And I take the company in the top left, the SEWS Cabind. Cabind is headquartered just outside of Torino, and they make wiring harnesses. Now, as soon as the day, if you want to know what I think, the best thing to do is follow me on Twitter. The day after Russia invaded Ukraine, I said that there's going to be a drop in auto production around the world, not because of semiconductors, but because of something called a wiring harness, this little plastic thing that all your wires go into. And if you have a cheaper car, they kind of fall out from the dashboard or under your seat. You can't build a car without these. I explain in my paper why they optimize the space and they protect the car from short circuits, from fires, the vibration and abrasions that happen. So most of the companies around the world, automakers around the world, they got a lot of their wiring harnesses from Ukraine. Sumitomo of Japan, Leoni from Germany, I can name many, many others. Companies that also have factories in Morocco. Well, production stopped, shut down in many factories, especially across Germany. I documented this in one of my articles on German-Moroccan relations. And automakers from Europe looked to North Africa, particularly Morocco, a lesser extent Tunisia, but particularly to Morocco. And it's this Italian company, see, the S in SEWS, the first S is Sumitomo, that Japan bought this company, bought it, but Sumitomo's plants it stopped functioning in Ukraine. So they turned to Morocco, and Morocco helped the value chain go. And this is and created supply chain resilience in the automotive sector. So that model, and Italy is central role in this. If you talk about Sogefi, you talk about filters, etc. These companies are all familiar to our friends from Italy. The same thing needs to occur in green energy and food production, and the two are connected. Now, I just want to say that Europe feels, Spain, France, Italy feels, they're preordained to be the dominant players. Europe is the end market for now. Sub-Saharan Africa, as was alluded to, is a rising end market, but that doesn't mean Europe is going to lead the value chain. So if we go next door to Algeria, Turkey is the largest foreign employer in Algeria. And which I've documented in my report. Let me just show you. Here is the Tosiala factory, steel and iron factory. It employs the same number of people in Algeria that SEWS Cabind employs in Morocco. And here you're looking at Africa's largest textile factory. Again, Turkish, employs 10,000 Algerians. So we can add to this. This is a message for my European colleagues. We add the Arab Gulf states, we add China, we had other countries. It's not clear that Europe will be leading these value chains. And then even within Europe, the Western European countries might not be playing a role. And this is, again, where Morocco-Italy relationship is key. So people that deal with climate change and food production are used to the European Green Deal, farm to fork. The missing piece is the value chains. And that is connectivity. And Europe, just prior to September 2021, Europe announced its Global Gateway Initiative, $300 billion by 2027. But what has to happen is, again, to help define the agenda, I feel the Western European countries need to play a critical role. And here, this is where the climate change comes in. I'm not going to get very technical for the people that are not here, but basically, as everybody knows, food is edible sunlight. It's energy that plants make that we can use and animals can use, that they do it combined with water and minerals. Well, to scale that up for industrial scale global food production takes 1/3 of global energy and at 37% of fresh water. So this is a food, water, energy nexus. I mean, you could see just to make a kilogram of wheat takes 15,000 liters of water. Now, the hazelnuts that Nutella in Italy uses that come from Turkey take 6 times as much water. And then cotton takes 9 times as much water. Now, to make water requires energy. Also takes energy to make water. I'm not going to get into details, but I teach in Pamplona, where is Pamplona up there in the mountains in northern Spain, close to the mountains, I should say. You can drink the water right out of the tap. So, but that water is not for free. That water is treated and requires a certain amount of energy. Now, for countries that cannot use water out of the tap or regions, which is going to be other parts of Spain, Italy, France, and certainly North Africa, you're going to have to go to desalination. And that's going to take 10 times the amount of energy that water that I drink in Pamplona requires, and the cost. So climate change is driving these changes, accelerated water scarcity, increased soil degradation, lower food yields. And you can read below, I don't have to explain how that can cause conflict. But there are answers. Now, very quickly, more energy is simply the answer, and that's going to mean more renewables, and particularly green hydrogen systems. So that's the future. Desalination, I already talked about, which will require more energy, which will mean renewable energy. I'll skip over that. Fertilizer is king, as I'll explain. But fertilizer, the key ingredient, component fertilizer, is natural gas. Not to make the energy to make it, but a constituent component, because the ammonia is made from natural gas and supplies the hydrogen. That's where green hydrogen will also be important. I want to throw into the mix something nobody talks about very much, but is biostimulant. So I definitely want to have a minute to explain that. That is something where is very important, and Western Mediterranean countries are in the lead. Biostimulants are actually part of agritech, and then electricity is another issue. So Russia might have poured gasoline on the food crisis, on the fire, the flames of the food crisis, but it didn't start the fire. I posted this on Twitter on June 3rd, 2021, where we see food inflation had already reached the same level as the buildup to the Arab Spring, and I read some critical articles about this. But one of the drivers here, you could see climate change is a crisis. This is Tunisia. I can't go into all the details. Agriculture uses 80% of water basically across North Africa, more or less. Tunisia has had droughts and floods, which degrade the soil. You can see all the statistics. The dams are silting up. This is true across North Africa. To make a long story short, without going into details, Tunisia is going to need desalination, which is going to need renewable energy. And it's, again, Algeria's crisis is even worse. You can see the details up there. And that's why Algeria, with its natural gas, has gone to desalination, but it needs to repair about 3 or 4 plants. And is building more, but even Algeria will need to go to renewables for this and for hydrogen. Morocco's case is similar, but a little different. Same droughts and silting, but Morocco has been emphasizing high value added food exports and high value added agriculture. And that's because Morocco has the largest percentage of its population of any Mediterranean country involved in agriculture. So the Plan Maroc Vert was a visionary program to help raise more people into the middle class, and it succeeded. Agri-food sector is 21% of Morocco's exports. But it is also, without any natural gas, Morocco has been forced to seek sustainable solutions, and these everyone knows. When this fully comes online, it will be the largest. You're looking at CSP and PV together. And then a very visionary national water plan, which will have desalination plants, but comes at a $40 billion cost. So again, just in the short term, a fertilizer is the key and is king. And here you can see we wouldn't have green revolution. The last 100 years, we wouldn't have the population we have if it weren't for fertilizers. Now, Morocco is very interesting because out of nitrogen mineral fertilizers, one of them is nitrogen phosphorus is key. You cannot grow plants. Plants cannot grow without phosphorus. Phosphorus is a finite resource. And unlike oil and natural gas, there is no alternative. And Morocco sits on 73% of the world's phosphate reserves. So very intelligent, it's an amazing story. OCP not only mined the raw material, but became what now is the fourth largest fertilizer producer in the world. You can see the statistics, very important contributor to the economy. But Morocco OCP, for example, has, unlike anybody in Europe, went and engaged in Africa and opened up 12 companies, subsidiaries in Africa, and then 4 more offices, and has raised food yields. I mean, look at Nigeria, corn up 48% because of OCP, millet up 63% in Cote d'Ivoire because of OCP, in Senegal. In Cote d'Ivoire, rice up 30%, Ghana, corn up, or maize up 35%, in Ethiopia, 37%. And this Morocco, I could go into all the details. They didn't just give money. They actually built facilities, trained farmers, connected farmers to suppliers and farmers to markets. Now, you can see in the bottom here, OCP is building fertilizer factories in these countries for both East Africa and West African markets. An amazing story and experience that can be replicated all throughout the food chain. Now, if you want to find out more about this and green hydrogen, you can find it here. So this is where green hydrogen comes in. This is diammonium phosphate, the most common fertilized phosphorus fertilizer, DAP. Like I said, in 2021, price of gas in Europe went up 400%. That meant by November 2021, the ammonia used here, you can see all the chemical formulas, I won't get into it now on the bottom, went up from roughly $100 to $1,000 per ton. This fertilizer reached its highest in 10 years. Now, if you read the news, BASF in Germany is now permanently closing its European chemicals production. Yara, the largest producer during this crisis, has shuttered its fertilizer facilities in Spain and France. The crisis is going to go well beyond 2023, the food crisis, because of all of these structural issues. They need long-term structural answers. So in this case, what if you could get rid of the natural gas using what's called gray hydrogen produced from natural gas and use green ammonia, which is produced from green hydrogen? Well, this is where we're going, and Morocco is a leader. I'll skip over how you make green hydrogen unless somebody in green ammonia. And here, so Germany was the country that jumped on this first. Germany was the first to have in Europe to have a green hydrogen strategy. Morocco made 2 agreements, building 2 projects, but they were all done in a development frame. I mean, Irasen and Massen do great work. But it was Germany did this in a development framework, and it got bogged down. There were political issues, which I don't have to explain to anyone. And these projects stalled. But so now the leading project is a private sector with Fusion Fuel, the Irish headquartered Portuguese technology, proprietary HEVO technology. It's going to create green ammonia that will the pilot can scale will cover 10% of OCP's needs for ammonia for its fertilizer, and can be scaled up even more. But Germany, when it made these deals, it signed also between Tanger and Hamburg the offload green ammonia to Germany. The new deal, Vitol, the Dutch company, is going to be in charge of any excess that can be exported. Likewise, there's a new Dutch initiative to build green ammonia in Morocco. So if Western Med doesn't show up, Western Med will lose. Now, the European Union, the other player is in green hydrogen is Egypt, and we saw a very big agreement between the EU. I won't go into the details, but in the case of Algeria, Algeria can go to green hydrogen despite its natural gas. Egypt shows the model, and I've published about it. But again, it's going to require a lot of infrastructure investment. This is the Benban solar complex. To replace all of Egypt's gray ammonia produced from natural gas, you would need 20 solar parks of this size. So there's a lot to do. And this is why for Italy and Morocco, Alboran Hydrogen and Saipem signed an MOU to build a green hydrogen, green ammonia facility in Morocco. And this is very promising. There's also Morocco Italian cooperation in wind power. And then extending wind power to the rest of Africa. So I don't have time to go into a lot of details, but there's a lot of room here. So what you need to do is get, not just build the infrastructure, but also on the model of the automotive industry, build for solar panels, build solar cell factories in Morocco, build solar panel factories in Morocco. There's many aspects of the chain, and then that's for the fertilizer. But here I'd like to talk about, what if you just needed less water for climate change? What if you needed less energy because you needed less water? Because already farmers can't utilize 50% of a yield potential, right? And that's all because of mostly because of abiotic stress: heat, cold, drought, flooding, all climate change, also salinity, which is related to climate change. That is the majority of the yield gap, and that's going to get worse because of climate change. The one thing that really can help, see, fertilizer is entirely chemical and can't really go beyond what it does already. Biostimulants.
Excuse me.
Yes, I'll finish up. Okay, fine.
Thank you.
These are just nutraceuticals for plants. They are biological. They're like herbal medicine for plants. And as you can see, they can survive drought conditions. They can recover from drought conditions, from heat stress. Now, the Western Mediterranean countries are leaders. Italy, Spain are leaders. Now, Fertinagro is a Spanish company that now is part of it has been bought by Spain, OCP, and they are working together. Italy is also a leader in this. The leading firm I put here is Hello Nature, but older people from Italy will surely remember Italpolina. Italian fertilizer company I put there, but they've just rebranded globally and now called Hello Nature. So there are tremendous opportunities. The European Union has been in there, but what Western Med countries need to do is to put all of this together, that the global climate change and food crisis is connected to food, water, energy nexus, and the value chains need to be established. So the take-home points are that it's the food, food, energy nexus that is the meeting point between climate change and this geopolitics. The reshoring is the framework for this meeting point, and it's where Western Med countries can cooperate to establish value chains. And it should be a matter of strategic intent. So this should be where government to government relations help produce the B2B relations that will create these value chains. So thank you for your time, and happy to answer questions or go into details in the question and answer period.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tenkom. Thank you for your presentation and the relevant analysis you made about the nexus food and energy. I want just to add that the supply chain in Morocco will be extended with the port of Dakhla, which is in the south region of Morocco, and that will make the supply chain more competitive to connect Europe with the sub-Saharan countries. Thank you. Yes. So the floor is to, the next speaker will be Mr. Massimo D'Andreas. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Istituto Affari Internazionali and Policy Center for the New South for inviting me here in Rabat for this important conference. I will try to discuss the paper of Professor Tankun from the angle of maritime economy. And my presentation, I have a presentation, so I asked to put the PowerPoint presentation. My presentation is focused on the regionalization of the globalization and how this trend could develop new opportunities of integration in the Mediterranean region, especially for value chain, logistics, and energy. The presentation is there, I suppose. Can you see?
Yes, I think.
Perhaps they can put in a whole screen. But in any case, no, because I can't move from otherwise.
Can you put it on all screen? Okay. Yes. Thank you.
In any case, perfect. I would like to start by checking together with you these figures. We can see there, but not there. Just 1 second. I can in any case continue. My first point is to check with you some figures. It's okay now. Yeah. Can you put the first one because I can't move? We see over there, but not over there.
Yeah, it's not synchronized.
It's not synchronized.
Yeah. Can you go to the c'est pas synchronisé. It's moving here. Yes,
yeah.
You have to wait.
Now it's okay. Perfect. So we can start by checking these figures. I think it's quite interesting because, as you can see, the vast majority of the global import-export is currently traded in an interregional dimension. 43.4% of the global trade of America is made between NAFTA and Latin America. 58.3% of the Asian global trade is an interregional Asian trade, and the figure rises to 68.4% for Europe. More than 2/3 of the European global trade is inside Europe between European Union member countries themselves. These are the most updated figures of a trend that started before the COVID pandemic, but we expect it will increase more in the coming years. And we can see clearly this phenomenon, so the regionalization, also from the point of view of maritime trade. If we consider that maritime trade accounts for around 80% of the global trade, from that angle, we have a clear representation of what is happening. If we compare the most important maritime global routes in 2011, which is the green bar, in 2017, which is the pink bar, and the 2023, which are the forecast, is the dark bar, we clearly see that the intra-regional routes are expected to grow by 70%. To this figure, we can also add the north-south traffic that is also related in a certain way to regional traffic, to regional maritime routes. I mean, for example, from North America to South America, from Europe to Africa. So if we put together these two figures, we have a total figure of more than 100% of growth for regional traffic. In the other hand, in the same period, the Asia-Europe maritime traffic has grown only by 34%. I cut 2 slides in order to stay in the time. So what we have seen from the perspective of maritime economy, so this regionalization in terms of trade, we can also be seen from company expectation. This is a recent survey. The pie you see is a recent survey shows that 60% of European and United States companies are considering to reshore some of their production from Asia to the motherland in the next 3 years. And we have already some interesting example that you can see in the bullet points. So I think this is a very important point because we are facing a period where we expect new investments will come in the Mediterranean area. So this is something we have to take into account in the discussion. Companies are also changing their key paradigm that has been used for decades. If we think just 5, 10 years ago, we come from a period that we can call, it was the period of the just-in-time model. The just-in-time was an imperative for companies. If a company needed raw materials or a product, it was sufficient to call for a producer. And in the globalization period, when everything was moving faster, delivery happening in a few days, the price was stable. So every of us in this room knows that this is no longer the case. This is no longer the case. And we are moving toward a period where stocks and warehousing are essential to avoid logistic risks for the shortage of components. That means for companies more cost, because if you have a shortage of component, you need warehouses, and that means cost. If we want to have a clear indication of what is happening in the Mediterranean region in terms of trade traffic, we must look at the Suez Canal. Notwithstanding the effect of the global pandemic, the slow growth of China, the impact of invasion of Ukraine from Russia, the political and economic tensions around the world, a new record of more than 15,000 ships crossing the canal, the Suez Canal, was broken last August with a consequent peak in revenues. That means that the Mediterranean is growing as a strategic role in the world economy. It is important also to notice that the Suez Canal Authority has already taken off an increase in tolls, both for ships and cruises, from January 2023. That means 2 important points. The first one, it means that they are expecting this positive trend will continue. And the second point, we expect an additional indirect impact on inflation because, transportation is a key point for every. So, having seen the global economic trends and this regionalization of the globalization, the key question is, can this regionalization have a positive impact for Mediterranean supply chain integration? My answer is yes, it is possible, but we need to work a lot for this. This is not something that will happen in any case. And one of the key tools to improve Med supply chain integration and trade cooperation is to invest in ports, logistics, energy, and to push for the development of special economic zones. Morocco is a clear and positive example that special economic zone can produce significant and positive impact in manufacturing industry production and in the generation of a new Euro-Mediterranean supply chain. Here in this map, which is not very clear, I know, you have all the number of all the special economic zone around the Mediterranean area. So you see a lot, not of these special economic zone are efficient and success stories, but there is a success stories coming from this country, which is Tanger Med. Morocco, in 2020, the Tanger Med zone ranked second world economic zone after Dubai Multi-Commodity Center. This is according to the Financial Times. You can see some key figures. Tanger Med accounts for more than 50% of Moroccan export and nearly 97% of trucks export, which is truck especially for short range. So, in fact, you can see that there are many countries like France, Spain, Romania, Italy, and Bulgaria, which are linked with Tanger Med. So there is, an essential tool for relation in the Mediterranean area. And more than 1,100 companies, more than 90 5,000 employees. So, I mean, a really success story. Italy is trying to follow a similar pathway with its own special economic and logistic zones close by the main Italian ports. The ultimate aim of these tools is to leverage. I think a little bit what was the key word to use for this presentation, and I choose to use the word to leverage the port as a powerful pole of development. So the port is no longer only the place where goods come and go or passengers, is a powerful, the potentiality is to become a powerful pole of development. And in the south of Italy, special economic zone gives also fiscal and duties advantages to companies to locate new investment, especially in manufacturing activity related to import-export. In this way, ports will improve their role in supporting economic and industrial development, and similarly also help supply chain integration. If we look at the Italian ports performances, we see that in 2021, you have figures over there, they already recovered from the pandemic period with positive figures in all the main sectors. And looking at this, at the first semester, the first 6 months of the year, the trend continued to follow positive development. You see the green flags are very, very clear. So, but now ports, and this is something related to what was said by Professor Tankun, now ports are no longer only, as I said, place for trade or passengers. They are becoming more and more important and strategic also due to the fact that they are also energy hub. Let me underline that point. I'm closing my presentation, but this is very important. This has become clear. I think it was already clear, but it's become clear as a consequence of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the great attention on all energy sectors. So why I'm saying that ports are energy hub? If you think a little bit, gas and oil pipelines arrives always close to ports. Refineries are near ports. Ports are becoming renewable energy producer. Very important. If we think about the North European ports, for example, the Northern European ports, they are producing green energy with offshore wind farms, and Mediterranean ports can do that with solar plants. Energy-intensive industries, like, for example, in Italy, like steels making industry, for example, Ilva di Taranto, which is in the south of Italy, is not possible to think about to reconvert Ilva, which is, as I said, a steel making industry with the green plant to convert with hydrogen without making a strong alliance with the port, where you can do hydrogen. Ports can be the key tools also for Hydrogen Valley, for the creation of Hydrogen Valley. To conclude, this is the last one. I think that the development of ports in the Mediterranean area can become the way to also increase cooperation between the two shores of the region. The war in Ukraine have an indirect consequence in relaunching the partnership with the North African countries, especially for energy. But we must pay attention. This is a very important point. The existing pipelines are now more important than in the past due to the sanction on Russia, but I think that Europe must use this opportunity to relaunch a broader dialogue with North Africa countries, not only for urgent fossil energy needs. Of course, there is an urgency. We need fossil energy for the immediate energy needs. But we should look in perspective, and in perspective it's on renewables and on hydrogen, and I totally agree to what has been already said. These are the two sectors where we can have a strong cooperation between Europe and North African countries, and as the Italian ambassador already mentioned, Italian companies are investing also in North Africa, and in this beautiful country is a positive example of cooperation in energy, green energy production. So here again, cooperation and developments of ports, infrastructures, and special economic zone to attract investors also in this sector. So why I put a focus on the special economic zone, because special economic zone can be used also to attract investors in energy, in green energy production. This is the way to help integration between the two shores of the Mediterranean, and I think that Morocco and Italy can play a key role in their respective areas. Thank you very much. I'll be at your disposal for the discussion after.
Thank you, Mr. D'Andreas. You highlighted the many issues, especially the role played by infrastructure, ports, and special zones. And I will give now the floor to Professor Larbi-Jaidi to discuss the paper. Okay.
Thank you, dear colleague. Thank you for the kind invitation to discuss this interesting paper. Even if the draft is not a final formulation, but it gives us an opportunity to discuss some important issues in a crucial context. The impact of climate change-driven pressures on the food-water energy nexus and the accelerated unwinding of global supply chains requires a new approach of the cooperation between the two borders of the Mediterranean Sea. And the paper is a real advocacy for a new form of economic cooperation among the Western Mediterranean nations to ensure food security. The region has enormous potential to develop robust trans-Mediterranean value chains for food production, powered by renewable energy and using green hydrogen-derived fertilizer. The paper considers that an important example of cooperation between the two parts of Mediterranean space is the successful integration of Italy's automotive firms into Morocco's automotive manufacturing sector. And the paper proposed to build on this experience to develop cooperation in renewable energy, green hydrogen, and agrotech. And before proposing some recommendations in this perspective, the paper highlights two characteristics of the new context. The first one is the fragility in the food energy nexus. The invasion of Ukraine created a food crisis that revealed fragilities in the food security systems in all the nations of the region. And the increase in natural gas prices is putting pressure on chemical value chains. On the Mediterranean southern shore, the pressures on fertilizer supplies are similarly acute in Tunisia and in Algeria. But we note that Europe has not the leadership in the development of Western Maghreb and Western Arab food production value chains. It's an important constant. And fertilizer use is the immediate key to increasing food production, particularly in the Maghreb. The second characteristic of the context is climate change as a driver, a fundamental driver of fragility in the food, water, energy nexus. And the fragilities in the Western Mediterranean food systems are not temporary. They reflect structural vulnerabilities, and drought has caused a chronic decline not only in Maghreb's water reserves, but also in some countries in the north of the Mediterranean, as Italy. Maghreb countries implement a variety of remedial measures, including the construction of energy-intensive seawater desalination. But Morocco faces some problem in food production because the scarcity in water. So in this context, the contribution of in our discussion, after the analysis of this context, proposed the first point is to extend the value chain integration in the automotive industry to reinforce the cooperation between Morocco and Italy. He notes that Italy's integration into Morocco's automotive manufacturing sector play an important role in the advance of the Morocco's automotive industry. Automotive products comprise Morocco's largest category of exports to Italy. I think 33% of exports. And in approximately 200 international suppliers operating in the sector, we have 10% of which are Italian firms. So we have effectively opportunities to develop this value chain by a cooperation with Italy. And I think that the last agreement between the two national associations in the sector opened some perspective to reinforce this possibility. But the second point is more important, in my opinion, is about the green hydrogen cooperation as a foundation for trans-Mediterranean food production value chains. The creation of fertilizer manufacturing value chains using renewable energy and green hydrogen are fundamental for sustainable and resilient food production value chains in the Western Mediterranean. So one of the priority objectives is transitioning fertilizer production from using ammonia synthesized from natural gas, gray hydrogen, to ammonia synthesized from green hydrogen. Morocco has abundant phosphorus reserves, but its lack of natural gas places a limiting factor on the capacity to develop this value chain. And we have actually many partnerships to develop this sector. Germany, Netherlands, but we observe that France, Italy, and Spain are not really present in this sector now. Morocco is expected to have the third lowest green hydrogen production cost in 2050 of this century. But the high cost of electrolysis technology, which is used to create green hydrogen from water with renewable energy, remains a major burden for the adoption of the relatively new technology now. And Morocco is faced with water scarcity. And water is fundamental for the development of this value chain. Morocco expects to lose some important of its hydrogen potential in the next decades if he cannot have a response of this challenge. And the response is the desalination. Donc, we have to be aware of this mainly important question of water scarcity challenges. I have some remarks on 2 minutes. The first one is concerned the analysis of the paper, and it's concerned the contribution of or the combination, precisely, of a bilateral approach with multilateralism. It is, I think, that an important question we have to discuss, because we are in a context where a political crisis is a constraint in defining a common vision and shared projects between the north and the south of the Mediterranean. The second point is about the links between the value chain, the vertical value chain, and the horizontal value chain. I mean that the integration of the two boards of the Mediterranean Sea required two combined dynamics, global value chain combined to regional value chain. And the third part, or the third point, is the comparison established in the contribution or in the paper between automotive sector and food sector. I think that the common points in this comparison of the two sectors concern the energy and the necessity to guarantee a green transition in the two sectors. Green transition in technical production, green transition in produce, green transition in the governance of the value chain, and so on. But the green transition depends itself on the imperative of scarcity of water and the price of energy and the capacity to accelerate the transition to renewable sources of energy. As part of the common point in the two sectors, apart this common point in the two sectors, the two sectors are really different in their modality of development in the value chain. Automotive sector is governed by multinational firms. So the role of the states is to create a favorable environment and favorable incentives to develop the value chain between the partners. But on agriculture, agriculture is an exceptional sector. Secteur d'exception, l'agriculture c'est un secteur d'exception, for human needs and for the importance of nutritional needs. And I think that the main problem in this sector is to develop a cooperation between Europe and the Mediterranean countries, and to reinforce value chain in this sector between Europe and the Mediterranean countries, the European market should be more broadly open to agricultural and agri-food products from the south. This might require an evolution of the common agricultural policy to integrate the imperatives of enhanced food security in the south and the development of sustainable agricultural practices that can create really jobs and create greater added value. So I think that this point is very important, and it's a topic that we have to discuss about this thematic to develop a coherent common agricultural policy and environmentally sustainable agricultural practices that generate decent incomes for the socio-economic benefits of rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your analysis and your proposals, Professor Al-Bishaidi. I will open now the floor to discussions. So maybe we can take one or two questions. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the panelists. It was very interesting. I just have one question regarding this focus on hydrogen or green hydrogen in Morocco. It's a question most that I give to Mr. De Andres and also Professor Tatanchum. We focus a lot on green hydrogen as maybe a way of the future. There's a potential there. But in Morocco, if we want to have this sort of infrastructure, we need a lot of investments that would not come mainly from Morocco, but also from outside. So our biggest partner, European Union. As long as the war continues, there will be less money available. So here you have the question between the role of the private sector. But beyond that, how is it possible to keep focusing on attracting investment on a energy source that is not proven yet? And how will this push us to think about new or focusing on other conventional sources, not necessarily fossil energy, but proven energy sources like nuclear, which does work. This is the first question. Actually, I have also a second question. It's given to Professor Raidi. We're talking here about opportunities to integrate regional value chains in the Mediterranean, but we see clearly that there is a lack of consultation between all the actors in the Mediterranean. Should we maybe think about a club or a forum on focusing on integrating value chains? I mean, the objective of the Union for the Mediterranean was to bring together countries and focus on all the potentials, but this is clearly not the case. And we have models that kind of work. Maybe the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. It is limited, but it does work. It did bring countries together. So is this something that we should focus on in the future to bring together value chains together? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question? Okay. So maybe I will invite our speakers to start answering about the question.
Sure, I would like to address that. Okay. And also, Massimo, it's nice to see you. Last time we saw each other at Torino, and this dovetails, and Professor Jaidi, thank you for your very insightful remarks. So with green hydrogen, I want to emphasize that green ammonia is key, because green ammonia is not only for fertilizer, but it is the least expensive way to store hydrogen. And hydrogen shouldn't be just looked at as a fuel source. So it's mentioned, Ilva is now being able to make green steel, 30% at least with the hydrogen. But it is a storage system, which for renewable energy is the key. I mean, now we're trying with batteries, but instead you can store the energy as green hydrogen in green ammonia, And then when you need it, you can reconvert it back to energy in a fuel cell, or you can use it to make green steel or in other green manufacturing. So it gets around the problem of the batteries and these lithium-ion batteries. And that's where Massimo's point about the ports is key. So for example, this Dutch company I mentioned, they're in Las Joaflasfa, because you have to ship it like LNG. And that's a big advantage. So we saw these pipeline maps. I need to be cautious about pipelines. Putting hydrogen through pipelines has a lot of feasibility problems. I've written a book chapter on this, and that's why I think it's more likely to go with shipping green ammonia than shipping gas through natural gas pipelines. So I don't want to go into more details and use up that time. But on the last point about nuclear energy, yes, that's an entirely discussion, but I would look at the X-Links project, right? And again, here's an example of a country outside of the Western Mediterranean, in this case, the UK, really effectively working with Morocco. If they can make these undersea cables, as long as they want to make them, right, which are going to go around Spain, going to go around France and land in North Devon, they're going to supply 8%. It's solar power and wind power combined, because there's an area in Morocco where the winds blow at night. So you have 24/7 base load power sent right to North Devon. And the amount of electricity this facility, if they can pull it off, will be larger than Britain's Hinkley nuclear power plant. So while I think nuclear power definitely has its merits and should be discussed seriously, and we should understand the enormous potential. Just if you took all the solar power in the Sahara Desert, right? If you could capture it all, now obviously scientifically you can't capture it all, but if you could, right, it would be 7,000 times more solar power than what Europe needs for its entire needs. You could 7,000 times all year, 24/7. So the potential is there in terms of the energy cooperation. And then and again, I think ammonia needs to be understood that it's the first in the wave before pipelines. And that's why I felt it was interesting that Saipem is in, and ENI needs to reconsider some of its approach. On Professor Jaidi's remarks, it's very important. Look, Morocco is Britain's #2 and now going to be #1 tomato supplier, citrus fruits. He's right. In Rotterdam, all these South African citrus fruits were rotting in the ships because of an issue of regulation. So as Europe has more of an energy crisis, especially in the wintertime, just think of all those Netherlands greenhouses. More fruit, citrus products, avocados are all going to be produced in the Mediterranean for Europe. I mean, France gets its tomatoes from Morocco. So there needs to be a smart way. Now, the northern shores of the Mediterranean have more agricultural land. So there are win-win opportunities to leverage mutual advantage. And so, yes, it needs to be done intelligently, and there needs to be a West Med platform to do this. You should lead the agenda for the European Union, not reply. And so again, yes, in my paper, I didn't get to it. I have the East Med Gas Forum in mind. I think the East Med Gas Forum should add renewables or create a parallel East Med renewable platform. I've published and written on that. And so there should be a West Med renewable energy forum or a West Med sustainable value chain forum that does exactly what the speaker suggested.
Thank you very much. Mr. Danderis, you want to add something?
Yeah. I keep the 2 points, investments and nuclear. Italy, I think more or less 20 years ago, reject nuclear according to a national referendum, but 20 years, it's too long time also for the evolution of technology. I think now we see is the current debate is starting again to think about nuclear, and I totally agree. This is my personal view that new technologies on nuclear are now more secure, and we must at least discuss the option. But I want to come back a little bit on the investment. Who will pay for? I think we should be clear on one point. European decarbonization goals, the carbon neutrality goals and all the European goals, this is my opinion. I think that Europe cannot reach its objectives, or if you want to be more diplomatic, I can say it's very difficult to reach all these objectives only by improving inside European Union renewable energy production. So what I mean is that we need, also from the European perspective, we need to think about how to import energy, renewable energies. And when I said renewable energies, I use the plurals. That means, of course, hydrogen, ammonia, but we also can think about biofuels, for example, biogas, and so on. Where? Only by the South Mediterranean region. There is no other option for Europe. So what I mean is that we also need we had a brilliant speech from the European ambassador to Morocco, and I think we need a European approach under which we can develop more bilateral relations, because not all the European countries are the same. I mean, some small countries are not like big countries in terms of technology, industry, ability to invest, and of course, geographical presence in the Mediterranean. So I can imagine that for Denmark, just to say, is less important than for Italy or Spain. But the European umbrella, the European framework, in order to also to, if you wish, if we look again from a broader perspective, the European Union and the North Mediterranean North African countries, which are of course very different one to the other, but in the last 15 years, the agreement in a certain way was we buy your fossil fuel, okay? So we cannot have a European Union that before the COVID pandemic already said, hey, listen, we advise you that in 30 years' time we will not buy anymore your fossil fuels because we want to decarbonize, we want to be carbon neutrality, so that means we will not buy anymore any fossil fuel, without in the same moment to propose an agreement for renewables. And this should be the framework. And I think that at the European level, countries like Italy, Spain, France must push more at the European level, at the Brussels level, to have a European umbrella in terms of agreement and broader cooperation, under which I'm sure that countries like Italy, Spain, and France, for technologies, for example, in terms of biofuel, we have a lot of expertise in Italy. So it's an example of a potential cooperation. So I think that in that case, we will not have the problem how to who pay, because when you have the European umbrella, the European framework, I mean, it will be more easy, at least more easy to invest.
Thank you. Professor Al-Bishaili, if you want to add concerning the integrated value chain.
I think that promoting investment for the creation or development of value chain is not only a transfer of technical skills or capacity, and it's not only a question of process and quality of management. fundamentally, it is a question of governance of the value chain. And the governance, it means the development between all the partners of an atmosphere, of climate, and spirit climate, to exchange experience and to create the capacity to collaboration between the partners and the state in a common vision.
Thank you very much. I will invite you to continue discussion in the break lunch. Thank you to our distinguished speakers, and meet you after, I think, at 2:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.